Hi everyone. Nice to meet all of you, nice focused. Some of you I know directly or indirectly through various medias. Mainly, I'm interested in the topic in general of frontrunners. Been playing around a bit with the general ones lately. Did some experience with them that I'll be happy to share, and just wanted to join the conversation and see what you guys are all about. So I'm here more of a lurker at this point, but yeah, happy to help. And seen some of my blog posts have been posted in the chat, so it's nice to see that some of you found them useful. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, so let's go straight into it. Thank you guys once again. And I think today we're going to have as our second research workshop, and we're going to do it in a slightly different fashion than previously. So I will make a couple quick announcements just to remind folks here. A lot of us who initial deadline for Flashbots research proposals will be this coming Sunday. So if you would like to qualify as a MEV fellow and be one of the co-authors for the Flashbots research papers, there are two of them. Feel free to create a Flashbots research proposal FRP following the examples and the template specified on our MEV research repo. And so, so for those of you new here, check out our research roadmap and grab a research question. And I think today we're going to focus specifically on I would say a gap that is necessary to address to bridge the research and engineering side of effort of Flashbots research. Specifically, we have sent out the research question ahead of time, and a lot of us have started discussing on the thread, and that is the MEV research issue number 24. And Alex, would you mind sharing your screen? Alex has already also shared the link as well in the current chat. And that will be the focus of our call today. And we will spend the remainder, if we have time, 10 to 15 minutes to address some of the open, unclaimed research questions that we would like to invite those of you here or your friends that may be interested to snatch these as FRPs. So, yep. All right. So, Alex, do you want to host this portion of the discussion?
Sure, that sounds good. Can everyone see my screen?
Perfect.
Nice. All right. So we want to spend some of this hour on talking about MEV taxonomy. Tina has opened this issue on the Flashbots research repo, which is public, but also Surya, who's on this call, and Alejo, who's not here right now, but who's also a part of our research efforts, have brought this up as a research issue that needs to be cleared up. And it is actually something that we want to, I don't want to say solve, but we want to have some consensus as soon as possible, because as we do more research and we have progress on different fronts, we want to make sure we're aligned on the terms we use to make sure, for the sake of clarity and rigor, as Tina has written here. There is a clear and academic definition to minor extractable value. The term itself having been coined by Phil, who's on this call. Hi, Phil. I'm not sure it's worth maybe going through the definition again, but I assume you guys all are familiar with the definition itself. So minor extractable value being an upper bound, or the maximal value that can be extracted by someone by a permissionless entity within the protocol that has that is the most powerful in terms of like transaction ordering. And so it's within this entity, you have subsets of other entities that can also extract value from transaction ordering, but miners are, in the case of Ethereum, the most powerful entity. Again, permissionless entity. There is a more formal definition that Phil in his paper Clockwork Finance that isn't out yet, that Tina has put here, where Phil defines extractable value within a block, and then miner extractable value is just taking that extractable value and having a condition on it, basically using the miner's permissions as the condition on it. So that's I guess the crux of the problem here, which I've outlined a little bit in my first answer to this issue, is, at least in our case, for some of the efforts we're doing at Flashbots, and that I'm kind of working on more closely, I think I've definitely noticed confusion in the term MEV, and also there's confusion because this is so new. It's a nascent kind of research field, and how we classify it and how we understand it. So yeah, this is, I guess, the context on all of this. So Tina, if that's what you had in mind for the discussion, I can just quickly go through what I pointed out, or we can just generally go through a discussion, because I'm not sure it's worth just going through everyone's comments. I
think framing it in a way so that I think we want to arrive at a conclusion that is actionable. I wouldn't say I think it's an ongoing topic, but I think we should frame it so that at least the engineering effort that we have will be essentially especially we're doing.
So I think the first issue that, and this is talking from experience, having written that blog post for Flashbots and generally talking with the community, the first issue that I think is a problem with the term MEV is that it is used currently both to mean extractable and extracted value. The actual definition is extractable, right? But when we describe, for example, the MEV taken in that block, we say, for example, the MEV extracted, etc. And so that leads to confusion for what is MEV. So the actual definition of MEV is a potential value, and is not extracted. And so looking to make that clearer would be useful, both for the public to understand what is actually meant when we're talking about a theoretical number versus when we're talking about what has been taken from that particular block related to transaction ordering. And so my first question there was, how can we better differentiate between the two concepts, right? So I mean, one natural answer is just to have extractable and extracted more clearly in the language of what we describe, in a way that people can see that clearly. So I guess that's one kind of issue that I posit to this call. The second one that I think is another big kind of misleading thing is that people expect that this value is extracted solely by miners, whereas the term miners for miner extractable value refers to that upper bound in terms of the rights that miners have as this most powerful permissionless entity, sorry. And so that's also a little bit of a problem. The term miner extractable value itself is rigorous. It is that's what it means, right? It's hard to have something else, but it still leads to a confusion where people think, oh, miners are extracting this value, when in reality, at least today, this value is being extracted by DeFi traders that are doing liquidations, et cetera, et cetera. And so coming to some more clarity there, I think would also be great. Coming to more clarity there, I'm not entirely sure whether it's just generally having more notice around who is extracting this value, or potentially again reducing the use of the term miner extractable value to more defined scopes rather than saying the MEV extracted here or something like this. The third point that, again, I want to posit to this discussion, or propose to discussion, is generally that people think that this problem is only valid in proof of work based blockchains, where you have a leader in the consensus protocol. And so they think, in proof of stake, for example, that doesn't matter, et cetera. And that's because of the term miners. So potentially having a broader term that is not miner extractable value, but I don't know, validator extractable value or something. This I feel less strongly about, and maybe it's more of a long-term change that can be accompanied with more research. And if you do introduce a term like this to include ETH2 in that, maybe you want that to be accompanied with research related to that, where how this values can be extracted. And then the last question, which this one is a little bit more, I guess, broad, and I'm not entirely sure whether we can come to a conclusion at this discussion, but it's definitely worth talking about, is, once we do have some sense of, clear language between extractable and extracted, and a way to kind of classify it at that level, the deeper level then becomes, can we differentiate between different types of value extracted? So I wrote, for example, good or bad. Bad, in that case, maybe meaning, a clear negative social impact. Maybe is there extracted value that is more desirable than others? For example, the extractable value generated from, price difference on Uniswap, and someone outside of Uniswap, snatching that arbitrage to rebalance the pool so that its price is in line with the other liquidity pools that are not Uniswap. That is MEV, right? That is extractable value, but it's useful value because it's part of the system. So there is a sense that should people understand what extractable value is, it can be part of the tooling of mechanism design in general. And I think part of having more well-defined terms around it means we can emphasize that more. And in our research and any implementations going forward, we can have more of that. And one last bit that I put there is whether extracted value only comes from meddling with transaction ordering, or if there's other stuff there that is non-transaction ordering related extracted value, and whether we should differentiate between these things. So in summary, 4 things. First one, the problem of MEV being used interchangeably for both the extractable and extracted. The second one being people thinking that MEV is extracted by miners. And the third one being that MEV is relatively confined to the reality of Ethereum today and its consensus protocol. However, MEV applies to any blockchains where there is where there is a leader in transaction ordering. So it is most blockchains. Yeah, so I guess this is what's worth talking about today, and in terms of reaching a conclusion, at least for these first two points. I'm gonna zoom in on them a little more. And so today on this call, it would be awesome to talk about this more, see what people think, and I'm expecting the conversation maybe start a little slowly, but then have back and forth. One thing I do want to say is obviously we're here to exchange with each other, and there's no don't be afraid at all of saying something that might be wrong and things like this. This is totally fine, and the point is to really bounce ideas and arrive at something that we think makes sense. So I'd love to hear Phil's view as the most knowledgeable on this call about this.
Yeah, I think we have the same issues, or the same 2 broader issues. I think I agree with you that the first one has ended up being way more confusing for people than the second, like the distinction between what was actually extracted, which is actually what we measured in Flashbots as a lower bound for what could have been extracted. But yeah, what could have been extracted is kind of the security term that we introduced, and like the attack analysis dealt with what could be extracted in theory and not necessarily what was. So I'd be curious to just hear what different people here think. I think one thing we're doing in the new paper, to give a little bit of a spoiler, is just like renaming things to extractable value. We're still talking mostly about MEV, but we also have this thing we call extractable value, which maybe is just a generalization and maybe will take off or not. I think the debate on our side is like, MEV is clearly a meme. It unifies people. People know what MEV is across various protocols. So there's like a trade-off between redefining, also introducing too many new terms in itself being confusing, and like taking advantage of the kind of brand recognition we already have while making it less confusing to people. And like, I wish I had an easier answer. In all my talks now, I like bold the able in extractable, but I don't think that's like a good long-term solution. That's just like the way I've been introducing it to people. But yeah, I think it is a real issue with the terminology, and I don't personally have a good fix yet. I'm open to what people think. I will say that my favorite, I guess, terms all include some notion of ordering. So like order extractable value, or like something like that. Sequence extractable value, not sequencer, but like sequence, I don't know. But these are all kind of also like somehow less punchy than minor extractable value. Minor extractable value is also like the scary meme of like the miners are coming to extract the value. And I think that has led to people actioning on it. So yeah, all to say, I wish I had a good solution. These are good issues, and I'd be curious to hear what other people think.
What kind of confusion is do you usually witness? Like just as a question, like I know, of course, it is defined as extractable and not extracted, but once you basically know more or less what it is, so I wonder, like, what are the kind of questions that were asked in confusion on this to maybe help think about it better?
Yeah, I think one of them is like, well, the miners aren't extracting anything, so like, why not? And like, the bots are the ones who are extracting, so why is that minor extractable value if the bots are the ones who are making the money? So like, people look at the game and they say like, right now the bots are profiting. That's just like on Wall Street. It doesn't really have anything to do with miners, except that the miners are processing the transactions. So why call it minor extractable value? That would be like one thing that I've had asked. Or I guess, yeah, there are more subtle versions of this confusion, just like when you show numbers and people are confused about like, are the numbers you're showing like things that have been extracted, or are you computing like the maximum possible reordering? So like, exactly what are you computing? The other high level point here, I guess, is that minor extractable value is really, the whole point was to have like a single number that can like measure, you know, everything, which I think it is in theory, but like in practice, it's probably going to be really hard to measure at any given time. So we're probably always going to have estimates instead of actual value, and communicating where those estimates come from, what the methodology is, and like what the limitations are, and how that differs from the actual theoretical number that is like measuring the security, I think is also a hard related challenge. And I guess one thing I also want to say, which is because I saw a chat message that said, the mempool extractable value. I think that is something we can talk about, although to me, like, that's I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a subset, because it somehow, like, reorgs seem to not involve the mempool. So like, if you do like a time bandit attack, I think that's also MEV, and maybe we want to split that off into a separate term of like single block versus multi-block MEV, because they are also different minor games that you would want to play. And like, it might be possible that we end up in a world where people are extracting single block MEV, the mempool extractable value, let's say, all the time, but no one ever does like a reorg on like a profitable period to extract like the full amount. So then maybe it's useful to have separate terms for just like the one block versus the multi-block. So I think these are all open questions that I'd love to hear got reactions to.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, I think other things I've heard, other proposals are like sequencer extractable value, which I think doesn't really solve problem A in our A, B, C list, but maybe does solve problem B. But also, I don't know, it might also be confusing, right? Because like sequencers are something specific in like an L2 context. And if we use sequencer extractable value to also refer to the fact that minors are sequencers on L1, that might be confusing.
Also might be confusing in the previous point that you made, that if there are no forks, then maybe it's kind of different. So I actually think that mempool extractable is maybe better relate to what it means when you hear it for the first time, at least.
Yeah, I think it might be worth splitting off another term. I don't know. I think we don't want to split our memes too much, but like having a special case of MEV that's like, you know, M prime EV mempool extractable value. I think
M1 EV, M2 EV.
Exactly. BEV, which I'm pretty sure is like some corporate acronym in Germany or something. Bot extractable value.
So for even actually looking at the comments on the issues, even within there is a slightly different understanding for what this value is. So for example, Scott is mentioning he sees a minor extracted value. I mean, he sees extracted at how much the minor actually extracted, when I see extracted as a value that has been extracted from transaction ordering, right? So it does feel like potentially taking that minor term away and just mentioning like value extracted from transaction ordering could be like a nice way to make it clear for people. And then there's an implicit thing that who has the most power in transaction ordering? Miners do. But at the same time, it kind of hints at the fact that bot operators do have a say in transaction ordering, and they express their preference through gas, right? Ultimately, it is the miners who order the transactions, of course, but at least there is a sense of a transaction ordering / transaction prioritization is kind of hinted at.
Yeah, I think I like. So I definitely think that we should move to extractable value. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we should discuss whether order extractable value is more clear, but like kind of the consensus I had with the co-authors of the Clockwork paper was like extractable is nice, but we still have to somehow communicate extractable versus extracted, I guess. And maybe that's like a communication thing, or maybe we can make that clear somehow. Like maybe maximum extractable value versus like realized extractable value or something. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Those might be a little too financial to be meme, but yeah.
I mean, I like the idea. I mean, I like the term MEV, and I think it definitely resonates with people. But I like the idea of having a more clarity around where this value is coming from. But so is like order extractable value, or like transaction ordering extractable value, is that a rigorous term? As in, does it encapsulate all the ways, all the like different? Because I mean, yeah, does order include censorship, for example? Yeah,
that's a philosophical question, and like if you want, I can also go have this debate with a bunch of academics whether they like this or not. Who like spend all day worrying about definitions. I don't know. I personally, to me, like ordering includes insertion and censorship, because the value is still, you know, in like the sequence almost.
Yeah,
it's like a value of a sequence, and I guess ordering is could be argued to not include insertions. Maybe it would be the main drawback, but
yeah,
I don't know. Philosophically, I feel like if you're talking about the value you can extract from an ordering and you can insert your own stuff, that's still like in scope. Like I think that would be fine. But that's just my own personal opinion. People bike shed about these things for like weeks, so I'm sure I can engage if that's useful. But I'd also be curious to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, this is definitely a bike shedding, at least in part. But I think maybe
MEV for maximum extractable value versus EV for just extracted value could be a way of differentiating. Though of course EV has the problem of like being expected value, typically. Though I guess
That's true, yeah.
it typically won't be confused for that, right? It's like a different setting, but the EV is a very common.
You could have
acronym.
EV, which is
Exactly. Your expectation of your extracted value.
Yeah. I agree. Overloading EV, that's a good point. Maybe not the best one. Maybe we should go back to the. I do like maximum extracted value, maximum extractable value. So maybe just change minor to maximum, and then have like past extracted volume. I don't know, P. I don't know, something that's like what actually happened.
I mean, one potentially good thing by separating the term from minor is that you could still have minor extractable value, and it would be one upper bound, and then you could have like bought extractable value, which would be an upper bound that the value that can be extracted by different actors of the system. One is a subset of the other, but it would still be potentially interesting to have another limit to point to say like as a bot operator, and not as a bot operator who's not a minor, this is how much you can hope to extract, or this is like the limit on how much you can extract.
Yeah, or maybe, yeah, I kind of like bot extractable value. So basically we say, if we look at only actors without hash power who can't, can't. Although I think it would be like if a bot was perfect, then it would be the same. So like really bot extractable value is asking like what's the loss in like the communication between bots and miners that makes that efficient.
True. Okay, so trying to bring back the conversation to some kind of actionable conclusions. Again, because this would be, we would use this term use this potentially revised term and definitions for our upcoming public communications and for generally communication within our research efforts to make sure we're like talking about the same things, right? So how do people feel about like order extractable value, or something like transaction ordering extractable value? So something where the minor term is taken away, so that leads to potentially less misled individuals when it comes to thinking that solely miners are extracting this. And at the same time, it hints at that it's from transaction ordering, which will make it a little clearer. We do lose the fact that having the minor term there sets a strict like definition of like the permission of that entity that extracts the value. But I guess there is an implicit link between transaction ordering and miners that people can make as they look into this more. So how do people feel about that? Tina, is that you?
I'm sorry, there's a rooster, a
In the
lot
bathroom.
of roosters mating probably around me. They've been doing that every 5 minutes, night and day. Sorry, I'll mute myself.
Shower to the sound of roosters. That's my kind of place.
You'll love this place, Phil.
So my straw man proposal would be instead of calling out ordering, to keep the MEV meme and just change the minor to maximum in all our communications, maybe even do like an explicit explainer page. And then I still don't know what the best way to talk about value extracted is. Maybe like then we just talk about bot extractable value, BEV extracted or something, like, or just EV if we want to overload that extracted. Or maybe we have like a special term like realized value or something. So we have like minor or maximum extractable value and like, maximum realized value or something, which is like the amount that was actually extracted. So just to change the acronym. So then.
So isn't there a risk by doing maximal extractable value that people are even more confused, because then they think it's minor, and in some older definitions it'll see minor, but then we say it's maximal as well. So we like, the M is being used for two different words.
That's a fair point. Yeah, I think there is a chance we could do a successful takeover, but that is a good point. Yeah.
All right.
I like the idea of saying something like extractable value realized, though, or something, or extractable value like profited. I don't know, like converted. Like exploited.
I think even if you overload the MEV acronym, I think either way, like you'll still have that case where people will see some acronym, right? Like transaction, whatever, right? Like TEV, and they'll go back and say, okay, what is MEV and how is that not TEV? Or I think that MEV confusion will stay regardless. But so yeah, I mean, I don't think it's actually that bad to overload MEV. Like I think it would be easier for people to continue to converse about it and not have to sort of constantly be thinking about how the terms, how new terms are emerging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And we can do like a little podcast circuit to get the thought leaders or whatever, where most of the people who are talking about MEV like on the same page about the new MEV. Like I kind of like the idea of upgrading it, because now that we have real proof of stake systems starting to do volume, it's kind of like the evolution of MEV. It still means the same thing in proof of work systems, like whether you use maximum or minor, they're equivalent for any old system. But now for new systems, we like gracefully upgrade the definition to still be valid. So that's kind of why I like that takeover idea. But it is practically going to be difficult to like overload the definition that's on Google and things like that. So I agree with that concern for sure. That's a good point.
No, but I like the idea of like gracefully transitioning.
Is the proposal to transition say
like the minor is the maximum in like all old systems?
So the proposed evolution, the ideal concept that we evolve into, is either maximal extractable value, or I thought we also, there were proposals but wasn't discussed, such as validator, extractable value, or transaction order extractable value. Those are, I guess, more generalized. Or do we pass on those already?
I think we kind of there's a little bit of a pass on this, because one, the MEV meme is quite strong, and it would be like changing that. And two, I think if you change it to maximal extractable value, you as Phil said, that encapsulates like proof of stake as well, for example. And so in that case, it's a much easier solution where we preserve or retain the meme that is MEV, while at the same time, encapsulate other consensus protocols. So I kind of like that.
Yeah, I think it's very clean, and I think the one thing I'd have again, like I like ordering, because I do think ordering is like fundamentally important, and people don't think about it enough. So that would be nice to like call attention to it. But I do think it would maybe confuse some people when it comes to like inserting your own transactions. So like just a big DeFi hack, for example, like let's say you have a fat BZX hack. It's not clear that that's like ordering extractable value, even though it is, but it's like clearly maximum extractable value. So yeah, I like REV also, realized extractable value, or yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a very clean set of proposals.
Cool. I wonder if Scott and Jason, if you have any comments on these particular terms.
I think the only term that I wanted to bring up that I brought up in my comment was just that there's a third one, which is there's the maximum that could be extracted theoretically. There's, we should look at how much is extracted, and then there's what the bots actually walked away with. It's a little less academic because it's not based on like a peer review of what's happening, but I still think that it might be interesting to make sure that there's room in the naming of systems to kind of capture those three attributes.
Mm-hmm. So that would be potentially like bot extracted value, right? So it's to be able to denote the value that can be extracted or has been extracted by an entity within that permissionless system that doesn't have such rights in terms of transaction ordering that miners have.
Right.
Okay.
So there's bot extracted, miner extractable, and miner extracted.
I would make it bot extractable. So then what I would say is like, look, this is the bot extractable value if you're a bot operator, right? And then we have another one, which is just like bot profit. We can just use the term profit, which is like our USD estimate of like the profit. And so you can see it as a business case where like for this value, you can make this profit because there's some associated expenses, and like it's like any other traditional business where there's like risk and expenses that you have to factor in from like the bot extractable value is almost like your revenue cap. And then how much of that you can actually take home is like on you as a business, basically.
Yeah. And changing market conditions, if it gets more competitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I totally see Scott's point though, and that goes back to the confusion, right? With miner extractable value, when you talk about bots extracting that value, having a term for that instead of saying, no, this is trading bots that have extracted miner extractable value is confusing, right? So if that's changed to maximum extractable value, and then you have a subset of that is bot extractable or bot extracted value, bot extractable value, something like this, we have a clear term to denote that value. I think that will make it a lot clearer.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. 0 TX fees for who? For the miner? So yeah, I think for the miner, we have to assume 0 TX fees, but probably like assume also capacity limits of like the hard-coded gas restrictions. So like anything they can do within that, I think would be maximal extractable value. The real bot profit will probably be where the TX fees lowering thing comes in. I guess a more subtle question is, should we include like the opportunity cost of like them not mining other TXs in the mempool? And I think that's also, we should also include that in the
definition. Jason, do you have any comments?
No, the name pages sound good to me.
Nice. All right. Well, we can definitely move on from this part of the conversation. I'm pretty happy with what we've kind of come to somewhat of a consensus on. I think it makes a ton of sense. It's kind of elegant as well. I like the backwards compatible a lot. There is the challenge of minor and maximal being confused. I do think we can do a good job at that. And in any case, because it is backwards compatible, they're not like completely orthogonal definitions, rather just an upgrade.
We can have like a blog post, like why are we upgrading it? And then we just like
totally. Or in the blog post about clockwork or something, I can kind of spend a little bit of time on that. Great. So for the rest of the discussion, Tina, either we can move on to other research-related topics that are not related to the taxonomy, or we can go to...
We're not done with the taxonomy. I think the ballpark of it is actually about a taxonomy is actually what buckets things fall into.
Yeah. So that was my second option for we can talk about. All right. So the now that we have somewhat of a more defined and clear terms that we plan on applying, the other question is, does right now we kind of encapsulate all this value as this one monolith, when in reality it can have a lot of different labels. And so thinking about what those labels are, would be super interesting to be able to classify this value in a systematic and rigorous way. This I expect is a much longer conversation, but it'd be awesome to start talking about it now. So I guess good or bad is very subjective, and I put that here more and more as to like taunt people a little bit than as like a very, very serious point. There is an argument to be made here that there is value extracted that leads to net negative social impact. For example, a hack or something like that. A hack that looks like a structural arb.
Can I interrupt here? I don't think in my understanding of a taxonomy, I think good or bad, imposing a value system on top of it before we actually kind of look at it more objectively in terms of whether there's other meaningful way of dissecting it. Like I think what the kind of sequence that Georgios is proposing is something that more along the line, because before we jump into good or bad, that becomes so subjective and it's going to be very difficult to actually reach a meaningful conclusion anywhere. But in terms of labeling, before we go into like labeling, like kind of can we in some sense like account for the different types in other systematic way that doesn't involve value judgment?
Yeah, you're totally right. I'll let people kind of talk. I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what other people have to say about this. I think one related conversation here is also our data gathering of like making sure we have a comprehensive view on all the MEV. And once we do that, kind of breaking that down, I think there's some obvious ways, maybe by dApps, and maybe we can cluster it further. So hear what people think.
Maybe some Scott from your side, from classifying MEV based on different types of dApps, do you think it's feasible? Like how can we do so we arrive at a comprehensive set and yet be able to label it in a consistent way?
Like as good or bad, you mean?
Not as good or bad. I think we should revisit good or versus bad after we have. I think we should first try to see if we can come up with an objective kind of classification based on types of transaction activities, or rather than directly labeling it, overlaying value judgment on top of it. So not good or bad, but rather like classifying based on the different dApps or.
I mean, how is that different from what we have right now?
Oh no, I'm not saying different. I'm saying essentially can we systematically so that it's actually when we're labeling it's comprehensive. Like, or can you explain a little bit to the rest of the folks here who's not familiar with our MEV inspect effort how we are currently classifying it and where you see as limit as to the current approach?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we inspect the various actions that occur inside of a transaction and get an idea of how token flows are moving and what types of actions are taking place, and we roll those up into a overall profitability and overall type of transaction. For instance, there could be a liquidation, it could be an arbitrage, there could be basic incentivized like bot maintenance. So, for example, if like a CryptoKitty birth, for instance, is not a it's not an ARB, it's not a liquidation, it's just sort of an incentivized bot activity. I think you could probably file things like the KP3R system into these sort of things. So just these classifications of basic actions roll up into a classification for the overall transaction with a profitability attached to it. It is limited by the very explicit things that we know about. I think that's probably the largest limitation is, we only understand the MEV that we have specifically classified via its internal actions. And there's a lot out there that we're not. For instance, one of the things that we're missing right now that I think is going to be really important because it's huge in terms of MEV, it's probably larger than all MEV combined right now, is the empty set dollar redemptions. Those are just massive 3 times a day MEVs, and because we haven't written the code for that, we don't capture that, and that's probably about, I don't know, $250,000 a day of MEV, sometimes more. And it's good MEV, right? It's like it's a part of the system behaving properly. So there are things that are kind of easy to tell that they are, quote unquote good. It's kind of hard to classify things as bad unless you, unless you've already classified them. You've already understood the sandwich attacks of Uniswap or these other systems.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. I think so. I sent a suggestion to the I guess inspect channel the other day that I think it would be good to cross-validate using other sources, like looking at mempool PGAs and looking at mempool data, just to see other heuristics for like, this is a bot, for example, if they play in a PGA or if they send spam during a block or something, there's a high probability that they're a programmatic actor. So we can just tag them and see like what percentage of those kinds of transactions we cover and which ones we don't. So I think that's one way to start getting the rigorous taxonomy. And then I think, like that's a lot of that work is also a good start of like liquidations, like CryptoKitties, like midwife pattern, I guess is what it was called in the first. I don't know what people call that pattern now, where you like poke a dap. But yeah, maybe coming up with those patterns and like some fundamental differences between them might also be interesting on the research side. So saying like, for example, maker liquidations are different from CryptoKitties birthings because CryptoKitties birthings, like you want it to happen after some block because of the protocol, and it like you want it to happen no matter what at some point after that, and like the protocol will pay for that to happen basically. Like it's a different pattern than like a maker liquidation where it depends on like conditions in that block, and like it may be an opportunity that's like ephemeral and it goes away at some point, or you may have like opportunities to rectify and like take away the MEV. It just seems like there's some differences there that we can kind of zero in on, like exactly how are all these different patterns that we've labeled ourselves different. So I think that's the thing that still needs to be done. Those two parts of like the validation of comprehensiveness and then also like a more formal taxonomy of like the types of patterns that we're seeing.
Yep.
Is that consistent with, I guess?
Totally. They're similar in that they are both actions that have been incentivized to anybody who wishes to operate them and need to take place within a certain amount of time. But the justifications and the way that they change over time is different. But they're both good, right? They're both intentionally created systems by dApp designers that are not only incentivized, but systems fail if they are not executed.
Yeah. And I think even for the good and the bad, like it'll end up being more subtle than that. So I agree with the suggestion to like call that out as a problem, but like table answering it until we have a better view. Because like even for like a maker liquidation, like it can be good if that position is actually unhealthy and like the person was just not paying attention and the price moved slowly and like everything worked as intended. Or it can be bad if there's like a black swan event and like the miner manipulates the order in this block to like push down the oracle to just enough of a price to liquidate before the user can respond and like also censors that transactions. It's the same mechanism, but I think like one actual scenario of it playing out would be good for the network and for users, and another one would be bad. So I don't think we probably need a more advanced understanding before we can start thinking about that, I would guess.
I want to quickly bring up the point that George just made related to that, where the current labeling is done for the single transaction, and it's then when you look at on the multi-transaction context that you can start having developing an idea of whether it was intended, unintended, and potentially good or bad. So it's in like sandwich Uniswap trades with large slippage and that type of stuff. I like the idea of using labeling for a single transaction that is relatively simple, like a trade, an ARB, mean, trade in ARB is a trade, but ARB liquidation, etc., where it's relatively clear, and then build on top of that where, well, looking at it on a multi-transaction context, you can better understand the impact it has had.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we definitely need to generalize any work we do to like sequences. I think the single transaction case is reasonable for like an estimate and a bound and a dashboard for bots, but I think, yeah, eventually we should definitely think about upgrading that analysis. And by eventually, I mean right now.
Right. So maybe the taxonomy is a multi-level one where there's a level at the single transaction level, and that's much simpler to kind of label. And then the real challenge will come at the multi-transaction level, where in that case it's much broader, but at the same time we definitely have ideas of things already that are net bad and net good. And these can be sequences that can be labeled or codified as good or bad, or I mean, good or good. I don't necessarily like good or bad. Maybe something more precise and less subjective. But intended, for example, could be another word, right? Some MEV is intended in the design of a protocol versus the unintended one that usually has negative consequences.
Yeah, I think in our taxonomy, the single transaction falls better into bot extractable value, because bots in the Ethereum network can't ask for other people's transactions to be ordered a certain way. That's like one of the limitations. So in some ways, they're like limited to the single transactions they can produce, and like their extractable value, their extracted value, the realized BEV or whatever, the bot profit is going to be the sum of all of those transaction values that they made. Because they can't reorder transactions or do other things other than make their own transactions to the miner. That's their only channel. So unlike for minor or maximum extractable value, where like the function is not going to be a simple sum of every individual transaction, it's going to be a function of the whole set. For bots specifically, you can just sum because there's like some independence there between the transactions, I think. But we might be getting a little too into the weeds. Yeah, I know we only have like a few minutes left and I want to respect people's time, but I'm curious if other people on this call have any other comments or research items or blockers, anything they want to talk about.
I want to hear, I guess, Tom, coming from product designer, manager for MEV Explore, which will help essentially, these metrics to manifest into an interface that will propagate essentially the definition of memes and taxonomy. What your takeaway from the current discussion is and how you think your any gaps in actually designing it or tweaking it.
Yeah. I have not spent as much time again thinking about this as other folks here, but my bias is always towards reducing acronyms and introducing new concepts, and at a minimum not overloading acronyms. I think we are kind of doing right now. And we talked about this a little bit last week when we went through the mocks for MEV Explore, where I propose just reusing and sort of repurposing the keeper concept, which is like getting more and more sort of popular in DeFi. People know sort of roughly what keepers do and sort of the activities that they perform. It's not one-to-one with I think bots or sort of MEV or reordering, but it's like a reasonably good enough approximation that I think we can reuse it for some of our purposes. So I would say biasing towards like simplicity versus like precision, I think is the right move in whatever sort of scenario that we go down. So a little bit hand wavy, but and I'm happy to sort of provide more concrete pieces of feedback if we have exact sort of an exact taxonomy that we're thinking about using. But that would be sort of the guiding principle when I think about this kind of stuff.
So, Tom, is my understanding correct in the sense that you believe that the keeper sets of terminologies, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more, because I feel like that's less, that has been not discussed basically in our current, terminologies. But I think we're aware of, but I think it'll be good to actually just elaborate a bit more. And I know that we're running up on time. I do think we should continue this discussion actually on this call for whoever actually want to be on this call, because I don't like to have our workshop to have no conclusion. And I understand that a lot of times I think a lot of research questions deserves a lot more kind of sharing of information so that it's actually very precise, that gives enough information for other folks to really think about. So I would like to encourage folks to stay on this call if you actually want to drive to a conclusion.
Yeah.
But Tom, please go ahead and explain a little bit on this.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of next steps, I mean, I think this kind of work goes better when you have a single point person who like does the draft, and then we can review as a committee or review as a group. But I think working as a group tends to be, no one really wants to sort of, put their foot down and say, hey, here's what I think we should be doing, and here's sort of the the fully baked package. So in my mind, what would be great for a next step is if someone stepped up and said, hey, here's what I think of V0 for like the taxonomy and the sort of preferred naming for all these different things is going to be. Maybe on next week, we all review and sort of sign off and sort of edit that person's draft as a collective. But I think that's why when I was sort of mapping out the box, I'm trying to use again sort of like terminology and metrics and stuff that like are again focused less on precision and more on like understand like the like grokability and people's ability to actually sort of intuit and understand what's going on, and that often means sort of reusing or repurposing concepts that people are already familiar with and language that people are already familiar with.
Can you share a bit more on the keeper set of terminologies that you're specifically referring to, so that everyone here can be on the same page? Because I think that's where most of us here are less familiar with the keeper set of terminology compared to a lot of the DeFi traders.
Yeah, for sure.
The traders.
Yeah. So I mean, I think like what Scott was talking about, or like the ESD bots, for example, or a lot of stuff that's in either like keeper.network or keeper DAO or like the maker keeper actual code base. It's like these things that occur on chain that aren't about like trading bots, where you're not taking a directional bet or directional position on buying or selling an asset or something like that. It's literally about capturing some sort of free money that is on chain. So that's poking something, that's arbitraging something, that is doing some sort of atomic sort of transaction that sort of guarantees some sort of profit. And there's a whole sort of I think like nomenclature instead of tooling, and instead of folks who use these kinds of things. And I think the way this sort of maps at MEV is like, well, who is going to be managing the keepers? Who is you could say arguably there's a miner, and maybe the miner is also running their own sort of keeper that is actually doing the sequencing and doing the transaction ordering. But like it's like that is sort of like the level of abstraction. And then it's kind of a question of like who is actually gets to fill that role, who actually gets to manage that process. Is it individuals? Is it mining pools? Is it things like that? So that's kind of what I was biasing towards keepers. I also don't want to be the only person sort of pushing for this if we feel like maybe keeper is not precise enough for our particular purposes. But that would be sort of my bias. But again, I think for like a next step, we have a lot of really good ideas sort of floating around, and I think it's a little bit path dependent, where it's like if you want to go down the keeper route or the bot route or the MEV or the MRV route, that sort of inherently sort of unfolds into a set of terms and a set of sort of product decisions. And so it's like these things aren't necessarily mix and matchable. So someone sort of, I think, should take a first stab at the spec, and then I think we all sort of collectively say, yeah, we're cool with this. Make a few tweaks, whatever. But I think right now there's just almost it's sort of too much of a soup, and someone needs to distill it. I don't know what the term analogy I'm going for there, but that's sort of my read.
Yeah, so I think in that vein, I would propose exactly that concretely, which is like for Alex to own this. At least he can work with me to clarify any of his confusions. But you know, I think he's more than excited to own writing everything up and making it all happen. And so maybe he can do that first draft in talking with all of us, and also with a bias towards as much simplicity and as few acronyms as humanly possible for this spec. Yeah, and then I think there's also like a separate question of like, in terms of simplicity, like even if we have more than a few algorithms or like 2 or 3 algorithms, or sorry, 2 or 3 acronyms internally, we don't have to like communicate all those to the public. So we can also choose separately, like this is the one we want to focus on in our PR messaging, and like the other ones can really be like art terms for people to understand more specific things that aren't technically obvious. So I think, yeah, that those are all good points, and we should make things, you know, super easy to understand. Maybe we should like also randomly get some people, once we have a taxonomy done, some like traders or miners, and see if it's clear to them or if they get confused.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I think the next step seems to be that we should draft up some of the conclusions. And Alex, you got volunteered here. So I'm assuming that will be one of the comments under the open issue right now, and share it with everyone here, and then everyone can continue to comment on the thread until we have good enough of something that will crystallize into a blog post, into documentations. And also the other thing that crystallizes into it will be the design and the metrics and terminology that describes the metrics and the documentations around the MEV Explore, I believe. So essentially, I think we want to, within the next week or so, have good enough of a conclusion. So based on our discussions on this, or for this phase at least, so that we can start building the product and to essentially elaborate on the meme. Cool. Anyone else has any questions or last words on this before we hop off? Well, doesn't look like it. Well then, thanks everyone for joining. We'll write us up and share it with you, and continue to comment async on the thread, please, on this matter until next week. And announcement, once again, reminder, the deadline for Flashbots research proposal will be this coming Sunday. So you can use Hawaii time, whatever, but we would like to have a time where we could review the proposals next week, and we will make the announcement of the research fellowship next week on the roast, and the roast will be next Wednesday. Cool. And Austin is presenting a proposal next Wednesday on good or bad, I believe, or essentially a very interesting proposal on the roast as well. So stay tuned.
Thanks for taking the time, everyone.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
See you soon.